Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a completely custom campaign in real time so that you can see all the thoughts, ideas, questions, comments, concerns, and other considerations that go into creating a full blown campaign using my methodology. I'm RJ Kerr, I'm your host as always, and today we're going to be picking up where we left off with the Sea Shanty Siren encounter. But before we jump into that, in case you haven't seen any of the other streams, or you're not caught up, or you're watching the recording of this, let me do a quick recap of what we've done so far so that you're not lost. So, as I said, we're creating a completely custom campaign with its own unique domain of dread. And to do that, we are using a story circle structure to give ourselves some loose framework to work with as DMs, so that we have all the pieces and parts that we need for a great story. But we also have something for which to deviate. We don't have a hard and fast rule, just to give us a little bit of help to filling in sort of the details. Um, we've already done a lot in terms of putting this together. We have figured out how our characters enter into this domain of dread through a portal that opens up on the Blood Moon. We have talked about what kinds of personal motivations would draw them into this portal and into this domain of dread. We have started we have figured out exactly where the characters would land when they come into this domain of dread, and it's a shanty town called Darkport on the edge of an inland sea. We've discovered this inland sea is a big part of the domain of dread, and that it used to be the basin of a thriving metropolis that's now fallen into ruin and become flooded. We have learned that the Dread Lord is an elemental evil that we're calling Ovander, and we're still figuring out exactly how he fits into the overarching framework of our campaign. But we've also built out the very first adventure that our characters embark on, one where they are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape captivity. And in doing so, discover, or I should say, learn about the existence of a long lost artifact that would give the wielder a modicum of power over this domain. And it becomes obvious that finding this artifact, getting this artifact, is their best chance of escaping the domain of dread with their lives. And so now we're working on a part of the campaign where the characters get proactive. They've escaped, they've re-equipped, they've had a moment to assess their situation. They've gone out, they've found a couple clues, and now it's time for them to start exploring the world, looking for more clues to eventually find the location of this artifact. And so we're using a node structure style for that, where we have various nodes, which I like to call investigative scenes personally, which are parts of our adventure, whether they're mini dungeons or full blown adventures or just encounters or what have you. But they're opportunities for our characters to discover, about usually about three or more clues that lead to other nodes, that lead to other portions of this investigation. Um, and therefore, it really allows our characters to explore the world and conduct this investigation however they see fit. They don't have to find all the clues, they can find a smattering of them, they can still all find their way to the end of the final solution, giving them a ton of agency while still giving us as DMs some structure to work with, making it a lot easier to write these adventures so that we don't have to kind of think them up on the fly as we go. So we've done a few of these already. We've come up with one that's kind of a dungeon crawl using our 5-room dungeon structure. We've come up with one that's a heist using a 5-scene dungeon structure. And now we're working on one that's what I would call a complex social encounter, where it's less of a traditional sort of adventure and more about interactions between the PCs and NPCs. So it's a role play heavy experience. And our working title for that is the Sea Shanty Siren. Um, and so the idea here is that there is a siren that has some information that the characters need. She's a predatory creature by nature. She lures beings for a toll and feasts on them. However, recently she has lost her voice and needs to recapture somebody else's, or needs to claim somebody else's voice to regain some of her powers. And she wants the characters to help her out with that in exchange for the information that she has. She has a few special requirements for this voice, and so she's selected 3 NPCs that she would accept the voice of. Um, and she wants the characters to go collect that via a magical contract. The catch here is that the voices have to be given up willingly. The characters can't steal them. They have to convince these NPCs or one of the NPCs to give up their voice. Um, and so we went ahead and started building that out, where we spent some time focusing on building out uh, the personality of our siren, giving her some things that she wants now, things she wants later, some of her values, secret to potentially work with. And then we did the same sort of thing for our NPCs, with the exception, or I should say, with the addition that we also gave them a dilemma, a reason why they might be willing to give up their voice, and a reason why they wouldn't want to give up their voice. Something that they can play both sides of the fence on when we're role playing them out for our characters, so that this becomes really about role play and not just a couple charisma checks. We did that for all of the NPCs that are viable, and then we came up with some complications. We started with the obvious thing: complications for failure. What happens if if the PCs approach an NPC and they fail to get that NPC to give up their voice? Well, we decided that word of this nefarious deal would start to spread, and it would affect the PC's reputation in both this settlement and surrounding settlements. Likewise, we wanted to add a little bit of complication to success, because again, don't want this to just be a handful of charisma checks and then just sort of a wham bam done sort of situation here, where we wanted to add a little bit more to this so that even if the characters succeed in claiming somebody's voice, there's complications. So we came up with the idea that somebody else in town who knows the NPC who gave up their voice would take issue with this. And so we created a couple other encounters depending on the NPC that the characters woo. So we have a relatively straightforward combat encounter for our bard. We have a more dynamic sort of chase encounter with the followers of our priest, and then we have a sort of mixture of the two, a role play chase, perhaps combat encounter with the ghost of the widow's spouse. And so some unique things here, so that we're not ending up with sort of a quantum ogre sort of deal here, where no matter what door you pick, it's the same complication. In this case, different choices lead to different consequences, which is really valuable when we're creating an adventure. And then we spent some time sort of defining what happens if the characters fail to get this voice, and if they succeed to get this voice, and can they trick the siren. And we came up through this with this idea of the characters being bound by a contract as well, that agreeing that if they couldn't acquire the voice they're looking for, that one of the PCs would have to give up their voice. And then if they did give it up, then the siren was forced to give them the information that they require, and that this contract would keep any side from tricking the other. And so we started work all the way back up the top at the beginning here with this idea of this contract, which grew into the idea of this sentient logbook. And we spent some time building out the personality in the logbook, building out how it approaches things and what it wants, i.e., it wants to remain the familiar of the siren, and it would make every attempt to get back to her if it was stolen. And we came up with the idea of what might happen if the characters try to steal it, what boon could they get from this, what would be the consequences of that. And we spent a little bit of time last time building this out. Now, part of the reason we're putting so much detail into this encounter is that we've really decided that we want this siren to show up again in the campaign. We want to be able to use her again and again and again. And so that's the only thing that really makes this level of detail valuable for her, especially with when we get into things like this sentient logbook and putting all this information in it, because it's only useful if it's going to come up, and it's more likely to come up if it appears multiple times. So we're going to continue building that out today. As usual, let me remind you, this is an interactive stream. And so as you have comments, questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas, or anything else TTRPG related that you want to chat about, jump into the comments and feel free to speak out there. Love these interactive streams. You guys come up with some amazing ideas. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as we continue on with this. That being said, let me go ahead and share my screen, and we will get rocking and rolling. So let's see here. We're talking about the possibility of some hallucinations with this logbook. The idea being that while in possession of the log, any creature who is not the siren begins to hear a faint but alluring singing on the wind. No one else hears the singing. And likewise, they begin to see the ghosts of those who failed to fulfill their contracts with the siren, many of who appear to be drowned sailors. And so we were working on the mechanical effect for this. And we came with the logbook is cursed. That makes a lot of sense that the target cannot willingly give up the logbook. And then we had this idea about having them have to do saving throws for exhaustion when they're not taking actions to return the logbook. And so the idea being that every day that they don't work towards getting the logbook back to the siren while it's in their possession, they've got to make a saving throw or gain a level of exhaustion, and that exhaustion can't be removed by normal rest or can't be removed by anything less than a lesser restoration spell. And so let's go ahead and outline that a little bit here. Bear in mind that these are second level characters, but that doesn't mean that we want this to be something that second level characters can acquire easily. This is a pretty significant magic item, and it would behoove us to treat it as though it's more likely to be acquired by more powerful characters. Again, this might be something that the characters come back to later on once they've leveled up to try to get this logbook away from the siren, knowing that it's a powerful magical item that they may be able to use. So let's go ahead and start defining some of these details because we came up with a whole bunch of cool ideas for this. Let's start shaving away these and making these practical. So the logbook is cursed. That's pretty straightforward. Saving throw against exhaustion. So let's see here. Let's say the possessor of the logbook must make a DC, and again, we're going to make this a relatively high DC at this stage. So, normally we wouldn't chuck a DC 15 at second level characters for anything that wasn't what we'd consider a deadly threat to them, right? Something so we want that kind of DC for something that they're almost certainly going to fail, which makes sense in this case. It's a powerful artifact. So the percentile must make a DC 15 Constitution saving throw against. Let's see here. Make a Constitution saving throw once per day. Whenever they do not make progress towards bringing towards reuniting the logbook with the siren. On a failure, the target gains one level of exhaustion. On failure, the target gains one level of exhaustion, which cannot be removed except by the use of a lesser restoration spell or similar magic. On a success, the target does not gain a level of exhaustion. Cool. All right. Yeah, so now we've got a mechanical thing that we can do with this here and really kind of work on this. And it effectively puts a time clock on this. The characters have 6 days to at least 5, because at 6 you die. At 6 levels of exhaustion you die. At least 5 days to get this logbook back to where they found it, unless they're going to try to tough it out with spells and exhaustion and what have you. All right, looks like we got a couple comments in the chat here already. It says Jonathan Russ says you could frame it as it gets heavier the longer they take. Psychological and physical weight, absolutely. In fact, I would almost, the way that I kind of would imagine that, and I might frame that for my players, would be that it almost gets more sodden as time goes on. Like it starts out dry and it starts to become damp and wet, and as it gets more and more soaked, you get more weight to it. It becomes this thing that is, that started off just a relatively dense book, but relatively light, and now is gaining weight with the seawater that suffuses it, as part of the the psychological hallucination that goes into this, and trying to kind of keep it in vein with the drowned sailors and that kind of deal. But I definitely um, really do like narrating the physicality of a curse like that. Yeah, I'm totally with you, Jonathan. 100%. Um, okay, so and then we talked about this fear idea here. And we had this idea of whether they were fear of undead or whether they were fear of drowning in the sea. Um, and I think we settled on them being that they would also have an irrational fear of undead. So let's say uh, the logbooks possessor also develops an rational fear of the undead anytime, I should say, whenever the target, I'll say the possessor, keep the language similar, sees an undead creature, they must make a DC, we'll say DC 12. Actually, we have stats. Let's base this off of this. Yeah, so 17. So yeah, let's say another. Let's say another DC. Ooh, we'll say another DC 15. Again, this is a more powerful artifact. So we'll say let's make a DC 15. Wisdom saving throw, or have the frightened condition for 1 minute. The target may remake the save at the end of each of their turns. Cool. So again, another easy mechanical effect that we can use in combat, that we can leverage as the characters sort of play this out, whether they're taking the book back or not. Then we had this idea of can the PCs bend the logbook to their will, and we decided that there had to be a way to take possession of this book from the siren. And we came up with this idea of there being a ritual that the characters could do to draw the spirit of the logbook out and sever its connection to the siren. And so, that's not something that I think would be immediately obvious. It would have to be something that the characters would have to discover or investigate. And I don't even know that it would become available knowledge with something like the identify spell, but like something like legend lore absolutely would kind of give this information about it, which is again is a higher level spell. So they'd either need to track somebody down who can give them that information, or they'd have to learn about this somewhere else if they're doing this early on in their adventuring career, or again they have to wait till they're more powerful to come and get it. Which there's nothing wrong with that, especially since we want them to have reasons to come back to the siren, especially since we're giving her some oracle-like powers that might be useful to characters going on. What we would say is, go ahead and get rid of that, clean this up. So let's see. There is a ritual to draw out the spirit logbook and sever its connection to the siren. To conduct the ritual, the PCs must meet the following criteria. Okay. They need a place of magical significance, so we can come up with an idea for that. We have collect 3 special resources. We came up with that: Ship's Bell, John Catton's hat, and Giant Squid Ink. And then we said the action must be completed by 3 to 5 PCs or NPCs, one being a living relative. And we'll probably want to define that to a specific number, 3 or 5. I'm kind of leaning towards 5 on this, since we need one to be a living relative here, and I think 5 also sort of comes up with the suggestion that unless this is a large adventuring party, um, they probably can't do it all themselves. They need to enlist a little bit of help. Um, so I think that's good. Let's see here. Mr. Beck says, "Sorry, I'm late. Oh, hey, good to have you here. Good to have you all here. Fantastic. We're just getting started. So, um, excuse me. All right. So, what kind of place of magical significance do you think we should choose for this? We talked about an unbound altar, a seamount, a cliff face of some kind. Um, what place would we want to put into this world where's the proper spot to conduct this ritual? Um, and I mean, there's always the option that we could say that it could work at any number of places of magical significance and leave this kind of vague, and create a couple of these spread around the world, which actually, now that I think about it, is probably not a bad idea, considering we were talking about expanding this idea of ritual spells. No, not which we're going to have to come up with a different name for, because we don't want it to conflict with the terminology for ritual spells, like ritually casting identifier or something along those lines. Um, but I guess these circle castings, these communal castings, whatever we want to call it. You know, having if we're building that out as a mechanic in this world, and there's other rituals that can be performed, um, then maybe we want to have there be several places of magical significance, and we don't have to worry about defining one just yet. Um, so. Uh, Let's see. So Orth says if the PC has read the logbook, I'd say like an area where the first contract took place. Um, Jonathan Frost says I vote for Cliffside, so you can have some harpies to harry the characters. Um, I mean, those could be one and the same. Let's yeah. Um, I like I like Orth's idea because it gives them a clear clue. There's nothing wrong with saying that pact took place, uh, that contract took place on at a cliff face on the at the side of the sea here, um, and uh, yeah, we could absolutely do something there. Maybe it was down in the sea caves, maybe it was up on the top of the cliff, maybe it was any number of spots down there. But um, we can certainly you know toss in some harpies in that place. Um, let's see here. So let's run with that. Um, let's say a place of magical significance. In this case, the spot where the first contract was signed. A cliff face, a cliff overlooking the inland sea. And we'll need a name for that place, something like that. Uh, let's call it. You know what? For now, let's call it Harpy Rock. Let's do that. Cliff, Harpy Rock, overlooking the inland sea. So, to that end, we don't want to forget that we have this location that exists in the world. So let's create it. Let's say Harpy Rock. And we can remind ourselves that it's a cliff overlooking the inland sea. Cool. All right. Fantastic. Um, okay. Wonderful. So we have that. And then the spirit of it. We talked about um, there being some sort of colossal undead spirit that must be tamed as part of this ritual, sort of the manifestation of the link between the logbook and the siren. Um, you know, I see. I go back and forth on this. All right. The So we want the ritual to be. We don't want it to just be, hey, you got to the right place, you collected the right things, and then wham bam, boom, you complete the ritual, huzzah, that's fantastic. But at the same time, we also don't want there to be a complication so significant at the end that it it is way more difficult than any of the things they've gone through before to get here. And so we almost got to think about this ritual as a dungeon in and of itself, right? An adventure on its own. That the characters need to go collect a few things, they need to find a specific NPC and get them to help them, and they need to find the location, and then the climax of the ritual is really our big bad encounter. Um, and so the question then is, what are we scaling that level for? And I don't think it should be level 2. It should be higher than that. And in doing so, we should figure out when we come up with that, how do we throw harpies in that equation along with this sort of colossal undead spirit? How hard should it be so that we end up with this difficult battle where they're trying to tame the spirit while they're being sort of, harried by these harpies? Um, and that may be a question that we don't answer right away because it's unlikely to come up straight out the gate here. But it's worth thinking about. So let's toss this in here. Um, let's see here. Colossal Undead Spirit. As the ritual progresses, the the undead spirit of the logbook emerges to confront the PCs. Meanwhile, harpies of the cliff descend to attack. Okay. Let's see. All right. Looks like we have a few other comments on here. Mr. Mix says, my Dungeons and Dragons version of the Horrified board game just showed up. That's awesome. Fantastic. Jonathan Frost says, this part of the adventure can really lean into a Greco-Roman aesthetic. Yeah, absolutely, you can. And that Ovander is storm god, i.e., evil Zeus vibes, or a Titan more fittingly. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. Definitely has some of those feels to it. And Mr. Mech says, I was thinking a Titan, a little Cronus style, maybe that predates the gods. Yeah, there's certainly something about him that is Titan-esque. So yeah, certainly something to consider when we're fleshing out Ovander. And let's make a little note in that his sheet here. Let's see here. We're going to say Titan-esque. Yeah, perfect. Cool. All right. So let's define the boon that we get here, and we can always come back and scale this encounter, depending on how serious or how advanced we want the characters to be before they can acquire this. So that might be something that we return to. So let's say the boons. Um, while tuned to the logbook, and it's going to need more of a name than just a logbook, but here we are. We need something more unique for it, but we're working with what we got at the moment. So while attuned to the logbook, a creature can form binding contracts with other creatures who speak at least one language. Doesn't have to be a language shared by the I should say it doesn't have to be a shared language. Okay. Let's see here. While attuned to the logbook, a creature can form binding contract with other creatures who speak at least one language. It doesn't have to be a shared language. In doing so, the creature can cast the Geas spell once per day without spending a spell slot and without using any material components. That's a pretty powerful boon right there. It seems like a simple thing, but it's but having the ability to compel people to do things. And we should probably put a spell save on here. So we're gonna say, let's say DC 15. Why not? We'll put that on there. It's been 15 for everything else. Let's stick with it. Yeah. So that's a pretty powerful boon. The ability to, especially in the context of this adventure, to be able to use this to effectively command one creature a day is pretty lofty there. Pretty big. Big ability. Something worthwhile going through this for. Let's see here. A couple other comments. Is there significance to why the contract was first signed at the Clift, or is that a later thing to flesh out? To be honest with you, I honestly wouldn't even worry about it. While some characters some players are going to be curious about that, what's special about this Clift, what have you. And if that becomes important, you can kind of come up with it, as the adventure progresses, or you can leave it mysterious, what have you. But there's only so deep you want to go into the lore of your world, because otherwise you'll never get it all built out if you go down all of those rabbit holes. So we can simply say that it was a place of significance, and it's one that they can figure out because it's the location of the first signature. And leave it at that. We don't need to do too much more into that. At least I wouldn't worry about it personally. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says ego is always a good personality fault. Yeah, as it relates to Dread Lords, absolutely. For folks like Evander, it could be a really good personality fault. So let's add that. Let's say ego, arrogance, pride, vanity, all questions there. We'll say flaws. Put those in so as we continue building him out. All right. So, with that in mind, I think we finished up the logbook here. One more comment. Let's see here. Mr. Mix says, have there been others to have completed a contract, possibly a bond? If the party tries to help rid the spirit of the contract, maybe they could seek one out. Yeah, that's a really good idea. There certainly should be other people that have. We would um, so you know there. We said that one has to be a living relative. So maybe even if there aren't anybody who's living who's completed one of those contracts, there has got to be somebody that is a relative of them. So let's make a note here. Action that must be completed by 5 PC/NPCs, one being a living relative. So should say one being a really one of a contract put on there. And we'll figure out a different way to phrase that later on. But one being living relative of a contractee. And yeah, say PCs can track down such an NPC by examining the signatures in the logbook. Cool. Yeah, that's a good touch, Mr. Max. That's a good touch on there. That and it gives them a reason to read through it a little bit and interact with it as an item. It's kind of cool that it can have its own clues kind of built into it. A lot of magic items don't, so that's awesome. I like that. And Jonathan Frost says, "Yeah, interesting segue into a new part of the adventure." Yeah, for sure, it absolutely is. All right, so that means that we are left with one more thing in our sea shanty siren encounter, and that is, what does the siren's nest actually look like? Um, and so we have the arrival here where the characters reach the atoll. They step off into the coralline shore. Their boots crunch as they trot upon eons of ancient coral and the bones of the siren's victims. A prevailing mist obscures all, forcing the characters to advance into the unsettling unknown. The coral is blood red and bone white. So they're moving on to this atoll. What do they find when they get to the siren's nest? And we had talked about it being potentially part of the skeleton of a leviathan or a whale or some other colossal sea creature here. Um, what do you all think of that? Do we want to run with that, or do we want to go with something new? Give you a second to chime in with your ideas. All right. Personally, I like the idea of this beached whale skeleton. Um, let's see here. Jonathan Frost says, I like that you're calling it a nest. I like the idea of a leviathan. And then Mr. Max says, I feel like the remains of a large creature would be a nice introduction. Yeah, I do too. I think that they set the mood for this being a predatory being. And we that the siren is a predatory being. Is she's literally living in the sort of the carved out husk of what has presumably been her prey. So let's go with something like that. Let's say, as the mist parts, characters discover. She's the character. Yeah, discover a looming shape which resolves itself into the gutted, rotting, skeletal remains of an enormous sea beast. We don't even have to name what it is. We can just say that it's a huge creature of the sea. Inside its exposed rib cage is a nest made of driftwood, how do you spell that? Sargassum, there we go. Which is very kind of like seaweed, but a little bit spindlier. It's another marine plant made of driftwood, sargassum, and bones. In this nest is resting in the nest is a coiled creature, half sea serpent, half human. Okay. Let's see here. Mr. X says, I went a bit dark and was like, it could have the skin or hide of some of its prey used as shelter, lol. Yeah, I mean, it certainly could. I kind of imagined that a lot of the drapings of this place would be the desiccated flesh from this sea beast that is kind of draped over the exposed bone of the rib cage. And yeah, I think this should be a gory, uncomfortable place. It should set the stage for the fact that the characters are making a pact with uh, a, a genuinely, dangerous and perhaps malevolent entity. Um, there should be some hesitation in making this agreement. As we talked about, this is probably one of those investigative scenes that the characters follow as an option of last resort in a lot of ways. Um, yeah. So let's see here. Orth says, God, it would smell horrible. Then it's, yeah, it absolutely would. DC, con, save, or sick. You could do that. There's certainly, stats for that kind of thing. If you wanted some inspiration for that kind of deal, you could go with like the stench from troglodytes or the mechanics on that kind of deal. For this kind of thing, I would just leave it to the description, especially since you kind of have the sea breeze here that carries it away. But I think it's certainly something worth adding to the script, to the description. Scent is a very visceral sense, and it really helps paint the picture. So we'll say the stink of rotted meat and rotted meat mingles in the briny breeze. And then Mr. Mex says maybe smaller creatures perched on top, tearing at some of the decaying flesh. Yeah. Jonathan Frost says weird predatory seagulls, jagged beaks, oily feathers, bedraggled appearance. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Atop the rotting, we'll say the decaying Leviathan, oily birds. Oily birds that, we'll say oily, draggled, sort of beraggled, bedraggled, extra G in there. Cool. Birds Um, Regal black birds, like seabirds, pick at the drooping flesh. Cool. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I think that sets a good scene here, um, and I think that it gives us, it really lets us create a moment where we want to give the characters pause. We want them to walk into this. We don't want them to, we want them to be a little unsettled. We want them to have second thoughts about doing this. We want this engagement to be one of last resort because it is so morally ambiguous. And that was part of the deal here. We wanted to make a moral quandary as part of this adventure, something that the players had to grapple with and how their characters would proceed. And I think we've done a really good job of that. So, as all things, we'll see how it plays out. But we can call this one a wrap. We have got everything that we need figured out. We don't need the sailor and the mayor. We can get rid of those. Let's see here. We don't need additional setbacks for the bard, the priest, and the widow. That's good. We've got all this carried out here. We'll need to, at some point, nail down all of the clues, but frankly, that's one of the things that we can kind of make a little more concrete as we develop some of the places they lead to. Let's see here. Mr. Mex says, I feel like this would be the first choice for our Tomb group. Yeah, our Tomb of Annihilation group. That is, that's a, I could see our Tomb of Annihilation group being like, oh yeah, let's go do this first. Absolutely. Jonathan Frost says, where does this lead next, RJ? Yeah, so, we have theoretically a link here. To some kind of link to this treasure hunter, right, that we talked about, and we've built out a small dungeon for that. A link to our initial sort of historian Old Salt character that we've come up with, who is a simple social encounter very early on in this. And then we have a link to this moving isle we were talking about. Let's go ahead, since we've already done the treasure hunter and we've got ideas for the story and all that. Let's define those clues real quick, and then before we log off tonight, before we close out, I want us to pick what the next adventure we're going to build out here is, so that we can jump right into that on Monday. So let's say. So I think the link to the treasure hunter is easy. I think that we say that it's lore about the, what did we call? It's been so long since we did that. Let's see, the treasure hunter's dungeon. Deep with the dungeon environment. Okay, this was one of the old. Let's open that up. It was one of the towers, the outposts of crumbling towers, windswept, stone bridges, the balconies. Yeah, this is one with we have our storm elementals and what have you in that. So let us say that the clue here. I'm going to say we'll say lore gathered from the siren speaks of the dungeon that was once a cluster of outpost towers currently being explored by the treasure hunter. So we'll copy that and we'll put that in here. Pop that right there. And then the historian, we can simply say, um, see here, um, old books with an written in an ancient um, dialect that are difficult to read, but could be deciphered. Sure, I'm misspelling that. Deciphered. There we go. Deciphered. There we go. By an expert. Put those there. Copy and head back to our Go and pop that down here. Since we've kind of gotten away from writing out a full sea shanty for this, which had been kind of the original idea, but there's nothing wrong with that idea evolving and growing. And frankly, writing a sea shanty is, while a cool little bit of world building, and certainly something that we might want to poke into. It can be pretty difficult for us to write out a full ballad just to litter a few clues within it. Instead, we can, we've talked about the siren giving some of this lore, some of this information kept in a particular place, and so we can lean on some of these books of old songs and what have you, um, and have them used as clues to link us to the various places where our characters want to investigate next. We want these to be nice, clear cut clues too. We want our characters to know, okay, I have this, I should be able to take it. I should be able to take it here. I should be able to take it there. This leads me to this one spot. That leads me to a different spot. Um, and so that there's not a lot of wandering about, because again, we want these to be straight lines between investigative scenes. Um, so let's see here. Jonathan Frost says, where does this lead us next, RJ? We're going to talk about that here shortly. Mr. Mech says, I'm really interested in seeing how the potential clues will be laid out. Yeah, absolutely. Um, for clues, it's way easier to reverse engineer them. I will tell you that. Instead of trying to think of a clue and then figure out how it connects, it's figure out what happens and then figure out how uh, the effect hints back at the cause. That kind of deal. Um, and then Mr. Mech says, after this is all fully completed, have you ever considered a stream where you can just answer questions about being a DM, almost like an interactive workshop? Yeah, I would be willing to do that even before all of this completes. So if we want to make, we talked a little bit about doing some special topics on Wednesdays. If that's something that we get some interest in terms of answering questions and giving guidance and that kind of deal, I would love to do that on a random Wednesday. We can just pick one for it. If that's something that you are interested in, whether you're watching the live stream or watching the recording of this, please leave me a note in the comments about that. The more of those I get, the more I know that that's something that people care about, and the more the higher priority we can make that. So that's a really cool idea. I would love to do that, Mr. Mex. Um, Absolutely. Okay, so jumping topic here slightly because we're getting towards the end of our time here. We have several more adventures to write as part of this node structure section. Um, so let's recap what we've done and what we kind of have out here, and then we can decide as a group which one we want to work on next. So we have the historical deep dive, so our simple conversation, our simple social interaction. With an old historian, old salt of the town, who has some information that might assist the characters in finding their next nodes. That one's pretty straightforward. We can knock that one out right away next time if we want to do that, and just do sort of build that NPC and kind of guide that interaction and leave it at that. Or we can move on to something else. We have done our dungeon for the treasure hunter. We've finished our sea shanty siren. We have done the ghost ship castle caper. It leaves us our wizard's tower, our moving isle, and our storm giant's tomb. We've done a fair amount of stuff already. So the question then is, what do you want to work on next? What do you guys think? Simple social encounter, the Wizard's Tower, a moving isle, or the Storm Giant's Tomb next? Let's go ahead and get your votes in on that, so that next time we can jump right in. Um, I'll give you guys a second to cast your thoughts, cast your votes as we do this. All right, Orth says Wizard's Tower. Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. That's one choice. That's one vote. Let's see here. Mr. Mex says social encounter could be a less complicated section to cover. Then I vote for Storm Giant's Tomb. Jonathan Frost, we can knock out the simple social encounter quickly. Absolutely, we can. All right. So, tell you what, we'll start with the simple social encounter next time, and then that way we're literally just creating an NPC because this person has no reason not to be helpful. And we're creating a couple DCs for dice checks for level 2 characters, and keeping that one pretty straightforward. We'll knock that one out right away, and then we'll move on to either the Wizard's Tower or the Storm Giant's Tomb. Since we've got one vote for Orth for Wizard's Tower, and one vote for the Storm Giant's Tomb, I was just about to say, Jonathan, why don't you cast the deciding vote? But I guess he just said roll for it. So yeah, let me get out the dice. Hold on a second, and we'll figure it out. All right, so simple D20 here. Odds are Wizard's Tower, evens are Storm Giant's Tomb. So let's see what we get here. Evens it is. It's a 14. Okay, so next time we will knock out our simple encounter with the historian, and then we will jump into the Storm Giant's Tomb adventure. We've been talking about that one for a little while. That was an idea that Jonathan Frost came up with, and so looking forward to us digging into that one. Well, gang, I think this is the best spot for us to go ahead and put a pin in it for this Friday. Thank you all so much for joining me today on our sort of this bonus stream this week. We're going to have a regularly streamed session on Monday and Wednesday of next week. Looking forward to expanding these. As I mentioned earlier, if you guys want me to do sort of other topics on Wednesdays, whether it's information about being a DM, whether it's about any other topic like the hero's journey or any of the story circle structures, or frankly any TTRPG stuff that you can come up with, let me know. I'm happy to start mixing it up and doing this as we go forward here. That being said, if you ever want to jump into one of my games, please come check me out, I should say, at startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. You can find all of the games that I currently have posted up there, which are all open and available for instant booking. But you can also click that request booking button, and that will allow you to request either another module, another time, another date, your own homebrew campaign, a homebrew one-shot, whether I write that or it's something you've written, or one that we build together. That gives us the opportunity to really kind of do anything and everything in there. So if you are interested in being a player in one of those sorts of adventures, hit me up there. I'd love to play with you. With all that said, if you've enjoyed this stream and enjoyed these kinds of videos and this content, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. All that stuff helps the channel grow and helps keep these streams as dynamic as they always are. So, few last comments, and then we will close out here. Let's see. Orth says roll a D100. 1 to 99 is Wizard Tower. 100 is Storm. Like your odds, Orth, says Mr. Max. Yep. We rolled. It was the Storm. So Orth demands a reroll. Cool thing about being the DM is no. I just say no. And Mr. Max, nope. What didn't even have to use lucky. Just rolled the dice. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And for those of you playing in my weekend games, I will see you all on Sunday. And for everybody else, I'll see you on Monday. Talk to you soon. Bye now.